The Lab. Written by Ron Mackenzie Lafergie. Narrated by, also, you guessed it, Ron Mackenzie Lafergie. I didn't know why I was imprisoned. I'd done nothing wrong. One minute I was minding my own business, and the next I was being torn away from my wife, thrown into a truck, and taken to my new home. Though home is being rather generous, there was nothing welcoming about this place. I'm not sure how long I was there. My sense of time took a while to kick in. By the time it did, it no longer mattered. I was changed. Probably forever. When the testing began, I didn't even understand what I was doing. They took me into a room and had me perform a series of tasks. They seemed damn near impossible at first. I was being expected to think in ways I never had before. But it seemed that failure was expected. Again, my memory of the early days is hazy at best, but the men in coats didn't seem surprised or disappointed when I failed to do what they wanted. However, this failure was not without consequences. After each test, I was taken into a room which would fill with a foul-smelling gas. It made me feel strange and pass out. When I awoke back in my cell, I never knew what effects I would face. The first time, my head felt like it would split open. I screamed and ran around my cell, searching mindlessly and fruitlessly for a way to ease my suffering. Soon, the gas returned, but this was different. It felt correct, like it was righting a wrong. The next time I awoke, the headache was gone, and I was glad. The testing continued. For a while, it remained an impossible task. It was like asking a tiger to swing on a vine. I simply wasn't built for this. But the tests kept coming, and the gas kept coming, and each time I dealt with new symptoms. They weren't all bad. After several rough days dealing with failure and painful side effects, I woke up from a gas session with a feeling of elation. For the first time, I forgot my wife and found myself running about my cell, not out of fear or pain, but out of sheer happiness. The weight that had plagued me so had been lifted, and for a brief, shining moment, I was glad. However, not long after, the second gas poured into my room, and I was gone. When I awoke, the sadness was back. I missed my wife. This went on for some time. Failure, uncertainty, and an utter lack of the freedom I had once known so well were taking their toll. One day, however, I awoke from a gas session and felt normal. No mania, no pain, just a feeling of clarity I'd never felt before. Not even back home. It felt like a veil had been lifted from my mind. For a brief moment, I forgot my worries and enjoyed this wonderful feeling. That day, I faced the test, and while I recognized it as the same test I'd always been taking, it now looked different. It was like I was seeing it from a different angle, and suddenly the answers seemed so obvious. How had I missed it? My hands worked as if of their own accord, and once I was finished, there was a loud beep. I jumped up and spun around, snarling and baring my teeth at whatever was coming, but it was just a woman in a coat. She reached towards me, and I recoiled, but she simply placed a fig next to me and stepped back. I looked from the fig to the woman and back at the fig. Since I'd been imprisoned, I'd been living off a nasty gruel which was shoved through a slit in the door. It had been some time since I'd had a tasty treat. But was this a trick? Could this woman be trusted? She motioned towards the fig and spoke words I didn't understand at the time. Again, I glanced between her and the fig, but eventually my hunger won out, and I grabbed the fig, greedily biting into it. If it was poison, so be it. Thankfully, it wasn't. It was just soft and delicious. Then the woman picked up the machine rearranged the parts, and set it back down. She motioned towards it, indicating that I should try again, and stepped to the back of the room to watch. Again, I easily completed the test, and again I was rewarded with a delicious fig. I gobbled it up as the woman removed the testing machine and left the room. I waited patiently, and soon she returned with a new instrument. This time, the test was a mystery. It wasn't quite as incomprehensible as the first one had been on the first day, but try as I might, I could not figure out what was required of me. No more figs, no more fun, only gas. For some time after that, the side effects became much less common. Some days I woke up feeling terrible, whether it was a splitting headache or crippling stomach cramps or, well, let's just say sometimes the stomach cramps weren't so mysterious. Most days, however, I could complete the first test with ease and was rewarded with a nice fig. Some days it even felt like I was close to completing the second. In time, I even started picking up the odd words spoken by the watching woman. I'm not sure how, but it would suddenly occur to me what she meant. When I acted on these words, I was given 2 figs. So I listened more, and I learned more. Test, reset, gas. Test, reset, gas. The cycle was unending. Soon the second test became a breeze, and I was shown a third, then a fourth. Soon I could complete a new test the very first time I came upon it. I began looking forward to the tests, eager for a chance to test myself, prove myself, and eat figs. Life was improving, but still I mourned my wife. Was she still alive? Did she miss me? Or had she moved on? The better I got at the tests, the more profoundly I missed her. Her touch, her voice, her mere presence was a balm I desperately craved. At night, as I listened to the voices outside my door, no doubt talking about me, I wished that I could break down the door and escape. Say goodbye to this place forever. But I'd tried that. The door was solid, and the men had weapons. I was trapped. After some indiscernible amount of time, I woke up feeling changed. I looked around my cell and saw it in a completely different light. There had been a gradual improvement over the last, I didn't even know how long. Time itself felt different now. But this improvement was like none other. I hesitated to even call it an improvement because I could feel my entire worldview being rebuilt, new pathways emerging in my brain every moment. I would make a realization, then realize something about that realization, then realize something about what I realized about that realization, and soon I didn't even know who I was anymore. But I did know one thing. I would not be a prisoner anymore. I would find my wife. I had to think fast, which was strange, as with my newfound abilities, it felt like I had only recently started really thinking. I had thought myself intelligent before, but now I knew there was so much more to know. I realized that they used 2 distinct gases on me. One which was experimental and had different effects on me as they changed its composition, and one which apparently turned back all the changes. I didn't know how it worked or how I even knew it, but I knew it was true. Every time I was tested, I was given a new formula. If it worked and made me smarter, I would be tested and spend the night in my new state of mind. If it caused problems, I was reset, and a new formulation was tested the following day. Either way, I was always reset before being given a new dose. I guess this was so they could have a blank slate to work with? I snarled softly at the idea of being used in such a way. It was odd. Before, I was aware that I was being manipulated, but it didn't seem like such an affront. It was miserable being so alone, but the fact that I was a test subject lacked this newfound sting. I took a deep breath and set that thought aside. I didn't have long before the next test, and I didn't know if I'd keep my new wits about me when it came. I spent the next several minutes trying to devise an escape plan. All too soon, I heard a voice from outside. "All right, buddy. Time for your test." I jumped. I swung my head towards the door. I recognized the voice as one of the men in coats, Jenkins, whose name I now realized I knew. And not only that, I could understand exactly what he was saying, as if I'd spoken the language all my life. All the conversations that I thought had floated past me had apparently stuck with me, and every word shifted into place just as I heard it. How peculiar. And convenient. I tried to act natural, not wanting to let them know the change I'd gone through, but I couldn't remember how I used to act. It was unimaginable to me that I had once been so clueless. I followed the men in coats to the testing area, looking as dumb as I could, making sure to memorize the layout as we went. Of course, I wouldn't be able to find the exit on my way, but I could at least eliminate some routes to give myself a fighting chance. By the time we arrived at the testing area, with the help of various context clues and an incredibly fortuitous floor map, I had enough information to have a 1 in 4 chance of taking the right path. And I had a hunch on one path that might make my odds a bit better than that. We arrived at the testing room, and I was presented with my most recent failed test. Of course, I knew how to solve the puzzle at first glance, and was momentarily embarrassed at my earlier simpleness. But then my mind went to other problems. How was I to escape? I slowly worked through the puzzle as if it was giving me difficulty, allowing me to glance around the room from time to time. There was only one door, the one we always used, so slipping out was out of the question. I was certain the woman, Shirley, apparently, was just outside it, in case I was to succeed. She always left me alone at first and never watched. I wasn't sure why. I finished the puzzle and moved on to the next, this time with Shirley in the room. It struck me that she seemed nervous. I wasn't sure why. She wasn't the one being tested and held hostage. Or maybe she was. That was a strange thought. I wasn't sure where it came from, but it felt right. I decided to fail the next test. If I did too well, it's possible that they would alter my program, which could make it impossible to escape. So I stared at the thing for several minutes before smacking it in an act of false anger. Quickly, Shirley left the room, and it filled with the reset gas. I expected this. I took a deep breath and fell to the ground, as if I'd been knocked unconscious. I hoped against hope that I hadn't gone down too soon and tipped them off. Through a slit in one eye, I watched as the gas dissipated, then was gone. I waited an extra couple seconds, then slowly let out my breath, taking in a welcome gulp of air. It was fresh. I remained awake. Next, a couple of large men in coats, named Vlad and Kragar, carefully picked me up and carried me to a bed on wheels, which transported me to the gas room. I made sure to keep an eye peeled for clues on the way, but saw nothing useful, as the gas room was just down the hall from the test room. Once placed in a chair in the gas chamber, slumping as if I was still unconscious, a thought struck me. Should I inhale this gas? Would it improve my thinking even further, heightening my odds of escape? Or would it doom me with negative side effects? I decided not to risk it, and when the gas started, I again held my breath. This time the gas remained much longer, so I was almost bursting for air when it finally dissipated and I pulled in deep, grateful lungs of clean air. I had made it. I quickly slowed my breathing again, however, as the men came back in and put me back on the gurney. I kept my breathing as even as I could as they wheeled me out the door and back towards my cell. This was my moment. Now or never. When the gurney crossed the path I had chosen to take, I suddenly sprang up, shocking the guards. I grabbed the thick club off one's belt and smashed his face in. He tumbled to the ground, and I hoped he wouldn't get up any time soon. There came a cry from behind me, and I dodged to the side just in time to avoid the prongs of some sort of projectile which the second guard had fired at me. I turned and struck him in the head as well. He dropped his own weapon, and a second strike sent him sprawling to the ground, joining his compatriot. I looked around, desperately, worried the gas would return and doom me to eternal captivity, but none came. I was alone. Quickly, I hit each of the men once more in the head to make sure they couldn't chase me. Then I headed down the hallway. At first, I was sprinting, but when I heard more voices, I slowed down and crept down the hall. The voices soon faded, but I continued to creep, embarrassed at how reckless I'd been at first. As luck would have it, after I turned a corner, I saw another map on the wall. Unfortunately, having read far less of their language than I'd heard, I didn't have enough information for my new brain to put it together. However, looking at the picture and thinking back to what I'd seen so far, I was able to deduce where I needed to go. Down that hall, then a right turn. I was close. However, I could hear voices coming from down the hallway, and they were getting closer. I had to find a place to hide. I tried the door nearby, but it wouldn't open. I tried the next one over, but again locked. The voices were closer. I had to do something. So, I did something I used to do a lot back home, which I hadn't done in quite some time. I ran for my life. I ran straight towards two men in coats, one male, one female, the former giving off a scream that caused the latter to give him a strange look. But I barely noticed. They were so shocked they didn't even try to grab me as I rushed past them towards the door. Moments later, an alarm blared overhead, and I heard footsteps coming from behind me. But I didn't care. I was so close. I turned a corner, and there it was, the exit. With a cry, I pushed my nearly atrophied muscles to their limit, reached the door, and pushed, knowing I was done for if this door, too, was locked. It wasn't. It opened, and I was blinded by sunlight for the first time in however long I was trapped in that hellhole. It hurt. I couldn't see. But I knew that I had to keep moving. My captors would soon be upon me. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know where I was going. But I knew one thing. I would never be a prisoner again.